Obina! Obina, are you sleeping? Wake up and see what your brothers are doing! They said I'm the murderer. Your mother told me to leave my children and go back to my father's empty-handed. She said I am just a tenant here. Obina, if you are really a man, don't let me suffer like this. If you can...
Before her husband died, life was like a beautiful dream. Neka was 28 years old, a woman whose beauty made people stop and look twice. She and Obinna lived in a big, modern house in the city. They had 3 beautiful children. Chidi was 8, Somi was 7, and Toby was 6. Their home was always full of laughter. Obinna was a good man who loved his wife. He provided everything. Neka didn't have to struggle for anything. She spent her days taking care of the children and supporting Obinna's dreams. On the morning of the accident, the sun was bright. Obinna was dressed in a sharp blue suit, eating breakfast while the children played around his legs. Neka, my love, Obinna said, smiling as he took a sip of tea. I have a big meeting today. If it goes well, we are taking the kids on a vacation. Just come back safely, Neka replied as she straightened his tie. That is the only vacation I need. Obinna kissed her forehead, promised to be back by 5 p.m. and drove out of the gate. A few hours later, Neka was in the living room helping Somi with her homework. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number.
Hello, is this the wife of Mr. Obinna?
Yes, this is his wife. Who is this?
Adam, there has been an accident. A very bad one on the expressway. You need to come to the general hospital now.
Neka's hand went weak. The phone slid from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud crack. She didn't scream yet. She just sat there staring at the wall while her children called her name.
Mommy, look! Mommy, please! Mommy, wake up!
Then, a long sharp wail broke from her throat. She collapsed on the rug, pulling at her hair. Obinna was gone. In the village, the atmosphere was not one of comfort. It was one of judgment. Neka was forced to sit on a low wooden stool in the middle of the compound. 3 elderly women surrounded her. One of them held a sharp, cold razor blade. Keep your head still, Neka, the first woman said roughly. This is the tradition. A wife must be clean so her husband's soul can pass. As the long, beautiful hair Neka had taken care of fell into the dirt, the women whispered. Look at how she is crying, the second woman whispered to the third. People who cry this loud are usually the ones who know how their husbands died. Neka looked up, her eyes red. What are you saying? I loved him. He was my life. The women just ignored her and kept scraping the razor against her scalp until her head was smooth and bare. The day of the burial was the most dramatic. The whole family gathered around the deep hole in the ground. When it was time to throw the sand, Mama Chioma, the mother-in-law, stepped forward. She took a handful of red earth and threw it violently into the grave. Obinna, my son, she screamed, if any man or woman had a hand in your death, may they never know peace. May the earth reject them. If it is the person you ate with who poisoned your life, let the ground judge them. She looked directly at Neka when she said it. The brothers, Jude and Chuka, stood behind her, nodding their heads and looking at Neka with hatred. Neka stumbled forward, her legs weak. She took her own sand. Obinna, you promised the children the park. You promised me forever. Sleep well. I will fight for our children. 2 weeks after the burial, Neka and the children finally returned to their house in the city. When she turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open, the silence that met them was like a heavy blanket. The house still smelled of Obinna's favorite cologne, and his spare shoes were still neatly tucked under the console table in the hallway. Chidi, Somi, and Toby walked in slowly, their small footsteps echoing on the tiled floor. Usually, their father would be shouting from the parlor, "Who is that coming to disturb my peace?" Followed by a loud laugh and big hugs. Now, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator. Neka stood in the center of the living room, her white morning clothes looking ghostly in the dim light. She looked at the empty recliner, where Obina used to sit to watch the news. The pain hit her fresh, as if the accident had happened only an hour ago. She sat on the edge of the sofa and pulled her children close, all of them crying quietly in the stillness of a home that had lost its heartbeat. 1 week after their return, just as Neka was beginning to figure out how to navigate the house without her husband, a loud, aggressive knock came at the front door. Neka wiped her hands on her wrapper and went to the door. When she opened it, her heart dropped. Standing there was Mama Chioma, flanked by Jude and Chuka. They weren't holding small bags for a visit. They had large, heavy suitcases and sacks of foodstuffs at their feet. Mama? Brother Jude? Neka asked, her voice filled with confusion. I didn't know you were coming to the city today. Without waiting for an invitation, Jude picked up 2 of the bags and pushed past Neka, his shoulder hitting hers. Chuka followed, dragging a trunk that scratched the floor. Mama Chioma walked in confusion. I didn't know you were coming to the city today. Without waiting for an invitation, Jude picked up 2 of the bags and pushed past Neka, his shoulder hitting hers. Chuka followed, dragging a trunk that scratched the floor. Mama Chioma walked in last, her face stern, as she looked around the parlor. A house where a man has died should not be left for only a woman to manage. Mama Chioma said, dropping her handbag on the dining table. We have come to stay. We cannot leave our son's properties to be wasted. But there is no space, Neka stammered, watching Jude drop his bags in the guest room. And we are still mourning. I need time with my children. Jude walked back into the parlor, tapping a bunch of keys he had taken from the hallway bowl. Mourning is over, Neka. From today, we are the ones in charge here. We are here to make sure our brother's sweat does not disappear into thin air. You should be happy your family is here to help you. Neka looked at the suitcases lined up in her hallway and realized the peace she had fought for was gone. The people who should have comforted her had arrived to take over. The first morning in the house, Neka woke up early to prepare breakfast for Chidi, Somi, and Toby. She was still wearing her white morning lace, her bald head covered with a simple white scarf. As she reached for the bag of rice in the store, a hand grabbed the serving spoon from her. Mama Chioma stood there, her face set like stone. Leave that rice alone, Neka. From today, I am the one to cook in this house. Neka looked at her mother-in-law, confused. Mama, why? I have been cooking for my husband and my children for 10 years. I know what they like. Mama Chioma stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. And where is your husband today? He is in the ground. I cannot let you feed my grandchildren, the same thing you gave my son. My heart tells me the truth, even if the doctors are paid to lie about accidents. Neka felt a cold shiver. Mama, are you saying I poisoned Obinna? You saw the report. It was a brake failure. Go and sit in the parlor and wait for your portion like a stranger, Mama Chioma said, turning her back to light the stove. A woman with blood on her hands does not touch the food of the innocent. Neka walked into the living room, her heart pounding. She saw Uncle Jude sitting in Obinna's favorite recliner. He was tossing a bunch of keys in his hand, the keys to the SUV and the smaller family car. Brother Jude, please, Neka said, her voice trembling. I need the keys. I have to take the children to school. They have missed too many classes because of the burial. Jude didn't even look up. The cars are not moving. They are part of the estate of my late brother. A woman who is being accused of such things should stay indoors, where people cannot see her shame. But the children have exams, Neka cried out. You cannot punish them for things you are making up in your head. Jude stood up slowly, towering over her. If you step outside that gate, I will shout for the whole estate to hear what you did to my brother. Give me the spare keys too, or I will throw your boxes onto the street before sunset. You are a guest here now, Neka. Remember that. While Neka was being humiliated in the parlor, Uncle Chuka was in the children's bedroom. He sat on the edge of 8-year-old Chidi's bed, his voice low and friendly, but his eyes were sharp. Chidi, tell your uncle the truth, Chuka said, leaning in. That morning before Daddy left, did Mommy give him any special drink? Did you see her put anything inside his cup when he wasn't looking? Chidi looked at his younger sister, Somi, who was already starting to cry. No, uncle, we all ate bread and tea together. Mommy was crying when Daddy left because she didn't want him to go. Chuka sighed and stood up, looking at them with fake pity. You children are too young to know the charms your mother uses. Don't worry, your grandmother and I are here to protect you from her. She is a dangerous woman. Toby, the 6-year-old, crawled into Chidi's arms, sobbing quietly. They didn't understand why their favorite uncles were suddenly talking about their mother as if she were a monster. That night, Neka couldn't sleep. She walked out of her room to get a glass of water, but she stopped when she heard voices coming from the parlor. The lights were dimmed. Jude, Chuka, and Mama Chioma were sitting in a circle, whispering. This house is worth at least 80 million naira, Jude whispered loudly. If we sell the cars and the furniture, we can split the money. I need to finish my house in the village. We shouldn't sell the house yet, Chuka argued. I want my first son to move into the guest room next month. He needs a place near his new job in the city. It's better he stays here for free. Mama Chioma nodded her head firmly. The most important thing is to make Neka tired. If we make life miserable for her, she will run back to her father's house. That is when we change the locks and take the children. They are our blood. She's just a woman we married. Neka leaned against the wall in the dark hallway, clutching her chest. They were talking about her life as if she were already dead. Obinna, she whispered to the shadows. Do you see your people? They want to make us homeless. The next day, Neka managed to find an old tablet the children used for games. She used it to call her own mother and they huddled together by the pillar, watching their father's things being driven away. She felt a cold, hard stone form in her stomach. She realized that crying would not save them. She had to stand her ground, even if she died on it. I am not leaving, Neka said, her voice low and dangerous. I will be right here at 12 noon. Do your worst. At exactly 12 noon, Uncle Jude walked into the parlor with a heavy iron chain and a new padlock. Uncle Chuka was behind him, carrying a black garbage bag. Time is up, Neka, Jude said, his voice cold and final. I told you to pack. Since you want to be stubborn, we will help you. He reached out and grabbed Neka by the arm, trying to pull her toward the door. Neka dug her legs into the rug, her fingers locking around the pillar of the dining area. Don't touch me, she screamed. This is my husband's house. You are thieves. It is our brother's house. Chuka shouted back, beginning to throw the children's school books into the garbage bag. You have no will. You have no right. Our tradition says you are nothing. Mama Chioma stood by the door, pointing her finger at Neka's bald head. Go back to your father. Go and sleep with your boyfriends there. You killed my son with your unfaithfulness, and now you want to eat his sweat? Out! The children were wailing, clutching Neka's white lace wrapper as Jude dragged her toward the porch. The neighbors in the estate peeked through their curtains, but no one moved. It was a family matter, and in the face of such heavy accusations, they chose to stay silent. Just as Jude pushed Neka onto the hard concrete of the driveway, a silver Lexus SUV screeched to a halt at the gate. The driver didn't wait for the gate to be opened. He laid on the horn until Chuka, confused, went to slide the bolts. A man stepped out. He was dressed in a dark charcoal suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. His face was set in a mask of absolute fury. Mr. OK? Neka whispered, her voice breaking. She collapsed onto her knees, not from weakness, but from relief. What is going on here? Mr. OK shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the compound. He walked straight to Jude and shoved a hand against his chest, forcing him to let go of Neka's arm. Who are you? Jude demanded, trying to look brave. This is a family issue. Get out. I am Obinna's lawyer, Mr. OK said, his eyes flashing. I arrived back in the country last night and saw the 24 missed calls from this woman's friend. I went straight to my office. Mr. OK opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document with a gold seal. He held it up in front of Jude's face. You said there was no will, Mr. OK said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Obinna was a smart man. He knew his family. He came to me a year ago. This is a legally binding will and a living trust. Jude reached out to snatch the paper, but Mr. OK pulled it back. Don't even try it. The original is in the High Court's vault. This document states clearly that this house, the cars, and all bank accounts are tied into a trust for Chidi, Somi, and Toby. And Neka, his wife, is the sole administrator and guardian until the last child turns 21. Mama Chioma stepped forward, her voice shaking. It is a lie. Neka must have slept with you to cook this paper. My son would never shut his own mother out. Actually, Mama, Mr. Oki said, turning to her, he left you a monthly allowance of 50,000 naira, provided you remain in the village and do not interfere with his wife. If you cause her any trouble, the allowance is cancelled immediately. Jude and Chuka looked at each other. The greed in their eyes was replaced by a sudden, sharp fear. The law was a wall they could not climb. We will challenge it in court, Jude blustered, though his hands were shaking. She killed him, the tradition says. The tradition does not override the Constitution of Nigeria, Jude, Mr. Oke interrupted. And as for your accusations of her sleeping around, I suggest you keep them for the defamation suit I am filing against you tomorrow morning. Now, get your bags and get out of this compound. Neka stood up. She wiped the dust from her white lace. She looked at Mama Chioma, who was suddenly trying to look small and pitiful. Neka, my daughter, the old woman started, her voice cracking. You know I was only trying to protect the children. I can stay. I can help you with them while you mourn. Neka looked at the woman who had called her a murderer and a harlot. She looked at the men who had tried to starve her children. Brother Jude, Brother Chuka, Neka said, her voice calm and cold. Pack the suitcases you brought. Mama, take your tea and your rags. If any of you are still inside this gate in 10 minutes, I will let the lawyer call the police for armed robbery. 10 minutes later, the gate clicked shut. The house was quiet. The heavy, suffocating cloud of the last few weeks had finally lifted. Neka sat on the sofa, her sofa, and pulled her children into her lap. Chidi looked up at her, his eyes wide. Are they coming back, Mommy? No, my son, Neka said, kissing the top of his head. They are never coming back. Ify arrived shortly after, crying and hugging Neka. They spent the evening moving the furniture back to its rightful place. Months later, Neka won the final court case. The judge threw out every accusation the in-laws tried to bring. Neka remained in her home, her head of hair growing back thick and strong. She was no longer just a widow. She was a woman who had stood in the fire and refused to burn. As she sat on the veranda one evening, watching the children play under the same sun Obinna used to love, she whispered to the wind, "We are okay now, Obinna. We are home."